She was sold by her own father at a bride fair outside Sliven at the age of 16. She never returned home. For years, no one knew what happened to Veselina, until a recording changed everything. This is a true story inspired by the behind-the-scenes story of human trafficking in Bulgarian villages where girls quietly disappear, and the world chooses not to see. But Veselina survived, and now she is the voice of those who were erased. Watch until the end to find out how she became the face of the fight against one of Europe's darkest crimes. Sliven dawned with a sky that was always pale, as if even the sun was afraid to face what was happening there. The cold wind descended the slopes of the Balkans and passed close to the dirt streets of the village of Kaloya Novo, a place too small to hide such big secrets. In this village, Veselina was born and raised, a girl with eyes that were too big for her age and dreams that were even bigger than her eyes. She spoke little, but she observed everything. Every gesture of her mother, every silence of her father, every exchange of glances between the neighbors. It was as if she knew from an early age that there was something in that place that could not be said out loud. At the age of 10, Veselina was already helping her mother in the small vegetable garden at the back of the house, taking care of her younger siblings and understanding that girls like her didn't have many paths. At the age of 12, she heard her name being said for the first time, hidden behind the kitchen door, along with words like dowry, fair, negotiation. Her mother was crying softly. Her father spoke in a firm voice, as if he had already decided everything long ago. But it was at 15 that she saw with her own eyes a group of men dressed in worn suits and with dull looks getting out of a black car parked at the end of the street. They didn't look like tourists. They didn't look like nice people. And for some reason, she still didn't understand. All the adults in the village treated them with a strange respect, almost a fear disguised as courtesy. That night, Veselina knew something was about to change. Her mother avoided her gaze, and her father barely spoke during dinner. The old radio hummed a popular song while her hands trembled slightly as she held the spoon. Her younger brothers played on the floor, not understanding anything, but she could feel it, like someone who smells a storm before the sky even darkens. The next day, her father woke up earlier than usual and asked her to put on her blue dress with white flowers, the only one that still looked new. He said they were going to the city to visit relatives, but she knew there were no relatives in Sliven. And yet, she kept quiet. She sat in the back of the car with her heart racing, staring out the window as the familiar landscape disappeared. Sliven was bigger, louder, more confused. Her father took her to an open-air market where stalls sold everything: fruit, clothes, utensils, but where what was not on display was what mattered most. Near the end of the market was a more secluded area where only men walked. No women laughed there, no children played. There were hard stares, quiet negotiations, and cold smiles. And it was there that she heard for the first time the word that would change everything: chosen. She didn't understand what was being said, or maybe she understood too much and preferred to pretend she didn't. Her father was talking to a man with a thick mustache who was holding a photo and pointing in her direction. There was an exchange of papers, of words, and finally a simple wave. Her father turned around and said nothing. He just walked away, and he never looked back. Veselina stood there, motionless, as unfamiliar hands grabbed her shoulders and guided her into a white van parked next to one of the tents. The door closed with a sharp thud. The air smelled of gasoline and mold. Inside there were other girls. 3 of them. None of them spoke. None of them cried. They just stared straight ahead as if they had given up looking back. The van drove for hours. No one said where they were going. When night fell, exhaustion made Veselina lean her head against the metal side of the wall, and it was there, between sleep and fear, that she promised herself. If she survived, one day she would tell this story. But no one ever heard from her again. She woke up with the sun shining directly on her face, but she didn't know where she was. The van had stopped, and now she found herself in a room with peeling walls and a small window with bars. There was an iron bunk bed against the wall, an open toilet in the corner, and a door that only opened from the outside. There was no mirror. There was no clock. Just the muffled sound of footsteps in the hallway and the suppressed crying of one of the girls in the next room. Veselina sat there, trying to remember her father's face, the smell of her mother's kitchen, the feel of the wind on the slopes of Kaloyanovo. It all seemed like it had happened so long ago, like a vague dream that disappears as soon as you wake up. The only certainty was that something had been taken from her, and that it would not come back. 3 days passed without anyone speaking to her. She received food on a tray slipped under the door. Always white rice, stale bread, and warm water. In the early hours of the morning, she heard men's voices arguing in languages she didn't recognize, Russian, Albanian, something mixed with Bulgarian, and sometimes the muffled sounds of doors slamming, groans, and running footsteps. She couldn't tell if it was day or night when the door finally opened. 2 men came in. One of them spoke her language, the other just watched. "Get up. Take a shower. You're going out." Veselina tried to ask where she was going. The man didn't answer. He just handed her a thin towel and pointed to a faucet in the hallway. The water was ice cold, but she didn't complain. She was dirty, her hair stuck to her neck, and her skin covered in dust and fear. She washed her face as if trying to wake up from a nightmare. But the nightmare was real. She was led into a dimly lit room where 3 other girls were being made up by a woman who spoke Romanian. The woman was quick, practical, impatient. She applied lipstick as if she were painting a wall. She fixed their hair with force, ignoring the pain of those present. Finally, she threw a dress over each of them. Nothing matched. The clothes were short, with fake glitter and stuck zippers. When she tried to cover her shoulders, the woman pushed her back into the chair. "Show them what they want to see," he said in a tone that Veselina understood perfectly. That night she was taken to a secluded house with bright lights and heavy curtains. It looked like a makeshift brothel. There was soft music, drinks on the table, and men waiting. Veselina's eyes didn't blink. She stared at the floor, at her hands, at anything but their faces. She was placed in a room with other girls. One by one, the men came in, chose, and left. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they didn't. Sometimes they shouted. Sometimes they laughed. With each door that opened, her heart seemed to slow down a little. When it was her turn, one of the women who was organizing the place grabbed her arm firmly and whispered in her ear, "Smile, and don't look back." She was shown to a room with a narrow bed, stained sheets, and a ceiling fan that made more noise than wind. The man waiting for her was old. He wore a white suit and smoked slowly, as if he were there just to test her limits. When she hesitated to enter, he stood up. He approached her slowly, lifted her chin with one finger, and said in drawn-out Bulgarian, "You're new. That's worth more." She closed her eyes and wished her body would cease to exist, that it would be just wind, just air. But when the night passed and the man left, she was still there, gone, but alive. In the following days, the cycle repeated itself. Always the same empty faces, the same thick hands, the same sound of the door locking behind her. She didn't know the name of the place. She didn't know how much time had passed. The world had shrunk to the size of that bed, the locked door, and the footsteps in the hallway. Until one silent dawn, one of the girls, Milena, with red hair and deep-set eyes, whispered a sentence while they both shared a piece of dry bread. Once a year they take some girls out, the ones they say have a profile. "Where to?" Veselina asked. Milena just looked through the small crack in the window. "Where no one returns." The next morning, Veselina woke up to a different noise. Footsteps were faster in the hallway. Voices were arguing in low tones, as if something was wrong. Milena was no longer in the bed next door. The still warm blanket was the only clue that she had been taken during the night. Veselina's stomach churned, not from hunger, that was an old companion, but from a heavy, damp premonition, like a wet blanket on her chest. A few hours later, she was called in for a test. 2 women took her to another house in a different neighborhood. Inside, everything was quieter. The walls were decorated with fake flower paintings. The carpet was worn but clean. There was a table with 2 men sitting at it. One of them was writing, the other was watching her. She was told to stand, walk in a straight line, turn around, smile. They didn't give orders like the others. They just watched and took notes. One of them spoke French, the other Russian. Neither seemed to notice that she was human. Then they took a picture of her. Just one. With a white background, direct light, and the curt order, "Don't smile." That night, back in her room, Veselina saw another girl come in, young, scared, with red eyes. She looked about 13 years old at most. She was wearing a child's sweatshirt and was shaking uncontrollably. Veselina tried to talk to her, but the girl would only say her name, Katya, and then she would cry. In the early hours of the morning, as the cold seeped through the poorly sealed windows, Veselina hugged Katya as if they were sisters. And for the first time in a long time, she felt something other than fear. Guilt, for having been there for so long, for perhaps having grown too hard to dream anymore. The next morning, the 2 were separated. Katya stayed in her room. Veselina was taken back to the test house. But now, there were more people. Women in tight clothes, platinum hair, and high heels. One of them spoke Italian, another Greek. They examined the girls like people choosing meat in a butcher shop. They touched their arms, told them to turn around, walk, look down. Veselina felt her face burn, but she no longer cried. Something inside her had closed like a door without a key. Later, he heard one of the men say, "This one goes to Vienna. It has the profile." Profile. The same word said weeks ago. The word that stole the name, the story, the dignity. Now it was just that, a profile, an image, a product. That night she didn't go back to her usual room. She was put in a dark car with no visible license plates and driven down a nameless road. The city lights faded away. The silence in the car was broken only by the sound of the driver's heavy breathing and the memories pounding in her mind. Her mother's face, her father's eyes, the promise she had made to herself. Well-dressed, middle-aged man who spoke Bulgarian with almost no accent. He didn't smile. He just said, "From now on your name is Nadia. Got it?" She didn't answer. He repeated, louder, "Nadia, that's your name. And you're going to learn to answer when you're called." She nodded. That was enough. The new car crossed the border into Romania in the early hours of the morning. The guards didn't even look inside. There was money on the dashboard, forged documents. Everything was ready. Veselina realized with a dull ache in her chest that this wasn't an isolated crime. It was a system, a market, and she was just one more cog. They arrived in Bucharest at dawn. The city woke up to smoke and horns, but the apartment where she was left was silent, decorated with cold, modern furniture like a stage set. A woman greeted her, black hair, a marked face, red lipstick. "It's better here than before, Nadia," he said with a soulless smile. "Here, you're worth more." In the days that followed, she learned new rules: how to speak, how to walk, how to smile. She was trained to appear refined, to convince, to sell a luxury role that covered the same pain. Every night, a new client, many foreigners, many men who paid to forget that they were destroying someone. But then one night, he showed up. Not as a client, not as something expected. He was a young man with alert eyes and simple clothes. He seemed more lost than she was. And when he saw her, he didn't speak. He just held out his hand and said, "You don't seem to call Nadia." She froze, and for the first time in months, Someone saw Veselina. She didn't know how to respond. The words seemed locked somewhere so deep inside her that when she tried to speak, her eyes simply filled with tears. The man in front of her didn't look away. It was as if he recognized her even though he'd never seen her before. There was something about the way he looked at her, not as a commodity but as someone who existed. That hurt. "My name is Emil," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "I didn't come here for that." She didn't answer. She couldn't. Any sentence could be heard through the walls, the cameras, the hidden microphones. She knew that the luxury apartment was just a facade. Everything there was monitored. He then walked over and discreetly slipped a small note under the wine glass on the table. "I'll be back tomorrow," he whispered. "If you want to leave, memorize this number." She didn't touch the paper right away. She waited for him to leave. She waited for silence to return. When she was finally alone, she read the note with her heart racing. It was a phone number and a single word written in a firm hand: trust. The next morning, she pretended to be normal. She went to the etiquette course, went through the makeup sessions, memorized phrases in German, Italian, and English. But inside, something had changed. A tiny spark. It wasn't hope yet. It was something else. A doubt. A crack. That night, he came back. This time, he was more direct. He picked up the glass, the same one as before, and again slid something underneath. A prepaid phone chip. "Tonight at midnight, if you can get out, use this. There will be a car waiting behind the building in the basement garage. Don't tell anyone. Don't hesitate." She swallowed. Fear was a knot in her stomach. But there was something in Emil's eyes that felt real. Alive. A thread of humanity pulling her back from the brink. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat in the corner of the room listening to the sounds of the city muffled by the bulletproof window. The clock on the nightstand glowed with red numbers that dragged on. When it read 23:45, she got up. With light steps, he crossed the corridor. He went down the emergency stairs, his heart beating louder than his own feet. Each step was a risk. Each noise, a sentence. When she reached the garage, there was an old car parked in the corner. Emil was behind the wheel. He didn't say anything. He just opened the passenger door. She got in without thinking. When the car started, she felt the air return to her lungs as if she were being reborn. They drove for almost an hour in silence. They left the city, took a back road, past dark villages. Finally, they came to a lonely house in the middle of a plantation. He turned off the engine and looked at it. "It's safe here for now, but not for long. They'll be looking for you." "Who are they?" she asked, her voice hoarse, almost unable to believe she was speaking. "It's a network. Bulgaria, Romania, Austria, Germany. Women are sold as if they were nothing, as if they were numbers. I lost my sister to this. I'm still trying to find her. But you're still alive." She was shaking. "Why?" he asked. "Why help me? Because if nobody does it, nobody comes back." He led her to a simple room. A single bed, a thick blanket, a clean pillow. It didn't feel like a hiding place. It felt like home. For one night, she slept without locked doors. But the next morning, the nightmare returned. The house was surrounded by 3 black cars. Armed men came out, speaking in several languages, with radios in their hands and determined steps. Emil tried to escape through the back, but was overpowered. She ran into the woods, barefoot, with the wind cutting her feet. She entered a field of dry sunflowers and crawled through the withered leaves. The men shouted, the dogs barked, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. When he finally reached the dirt road on the other side, an old truck was passing by. Without thinking, he ran into the middle of the road, arms raised. The driver braked at the last second. "Are you crazy?" he shouted in Bulgarian. "Do you want to die?" She threw herself on the floor, crying, "Please, take me away from here." The man hesitated, looked around. Then he opened the passenger door. "Come up, quickly." And there, covered in dust and pain, Veselina fled for the second time. But now she knew they were everywhere, and she was a living witness to what no one wants the world to see. The truck driver's name was Stefan. He was from Veliko Tarnovo and transported sacks of cement to villages in northern Bulgaria. He was about 50 years old, unshaven, and had a look of suspicion and compassion in his eyes. For the first 20 minutes of the journey, he asked no questions. He simply drove with his eyes fixed on the road, while Veselina shivered beside him, wrapped in the blanket he had thrown over her shoulders. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost as if he were talking to himself. "You ran away from some really dirty place, didn't you?" She hesitated, but nodded. "You don't have to tell me now. I just want to know if you're hurt." "No. Physically, no." Her voice was almost a whisper. Stefan let out a heavy sigh. He picked up a bottle of water and held it out. "Here you go. You look like a ghost. I don't know what they did to you, young lady, but if anyone comes asking, you're my niece. Do you understand?" She nodded again. The word niece sounded strange, but safe. For hours, they traveled along dirt roads, through small towns, and through nearly impassable stretches. Stefan spoke little, but he was careful. He stopped at an old gas station, bought some simple food, bread, cheese, apples, and let her eat on the back of the truck while he carefully observed the surroundings. There was no sign of anyone following them, but Veselina's silence spoke volumes. She knew such an organized network left no loose ends. On the second night, they arrived at the house of Stefan's sister, a widow who lived with 2 children on a remote hill. Her name was Rada, and when she saw Veselina, she understood everything without having to say a word. "Let her stay in Petar's room," he said, referring to his son who was serving in the army. "No one here will mess with her." Over the next few days, Veselina began to recover a modicum of herself. She took warm baths, slept in clean sheets, and ate fresh food. But she was still afraid of the dark. She still woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of doors slamming, even though they only existed in her memory. Little by little, Rada managed to get her to talk. Not the details, but enough to understand that the girl had been taken, sold, turned into a shadow. Stefan decided to go to the local police station. He took a copy of the photo that Veselina still had in her memory, the image of the black car, the face of the first man who bought her, the name of the woman who organized the tests. But what he found was silence. A police officer looked at the file, recognized a name, and then, as if by automatic reflex, said, "You're playing with fire, Stefan. Forget it." "It's human trafficking," Stefan shouted. "It's a 16-year-old girl. She's been sold." The police officer just looked down. "You have a family. So do I. Sometimes we have to accept that certain things won't change." Stefan returned home distraught. He locked the door. And for the first time, he told Veselina everything. He said that this was nothing new. That for years girls had been disappearing from villages like hers. That the bride market was just a front. Behind it were politicians, businessmen, police officers, even diplomats. People who would never be arrested because they bought their silence. "But I won't keep quiet," he said, staring at the girl with firm eyes. "I saw my sister disappear like that. I won't let you disappear too." "And what are you going to do?" she asked. "Record you. Tell your story. Send it out for the world to see." "What if they find me? Then we have nothing left to lose." "But they do. They have a name. They have a reputation. You are a threat because you are still alive, and that scares them more than you can imagine." That night, with the camera on an old cell phone propped up on a pile of books, Veselina told the story. Not everything, but enough. She told the name of the village, her father's name, the name of the man who sold her. She described the cars, the house, the trips, the languages. She said that other girls were trapped, that some were still children, that no one got out. Stefan sent the video to a journalist in Sofia, a woman with a reputation for being fearless. And then they waited. For 2 days, silence. In the third, the journalist responded. She said she was checking everything, that it was serious, that she needed to confirm, but that she would not drop the case. It was on that same day that someone appeared at the house. A woman, well-dressed, with a slight accent for someone from the region. She said she was looking for a missing young woman. She showed a photo. It was Veselina, but with a different name, a different story. She escaped from a mental hospital. She is dangerous. We are concerned for her safety. Stefan lied. He said he didn't know anything, that no one lived there. But that night, fear hit hard again. They knew. Rada had started locking the doors before it was even dark. Stefan slept with a shotgun propped behind his kitchen chair. The television, turned up low, broadcast the same old news: politics, football, economic troubles. But not a word about the missing girls. No news reports, no voices calling for justice. It seemed the whole world had gone deaf. Veselina paced around the house, biting her nails, her eyes always peeking through the curtains on the front window. She no longer knew whether she wanted to be heard or disappear altogether. She was a victim, but also a living threat to a system that lived on silence. Every night, without a response from the journalist, her despair grew. Every car that drove slowly past the house made her stomach turn inside out. On the morning of the 5th day, a message finally arrived. The journalist, whose name was Nevena Dimitrova, confirmed part of what Veselina had said. She had tracked down a property in Bucharest, a false identity used by one of the women mentioned. 2 of the names given by Veselina were in old archived investigations. There was something, but not enough to arrest anyone. Not yet. "I need you to come with me to Sofia," Nevena said via voicemail. "I have contacts in the international press. If your story gets out there, someone will be forced to act, but you have to be willing to show your face, to talk. It's going to be dangerous. Are you up for it?" She didn't answer right away. Stefan stared at her for long seconds. Rada just lowered her head. It was the choice no one should have to make, and yet it was hers. "I'll do it," he said finally. 2 days later, now disguised, with a new haircut, neutral clothes and sunglasses, Veselina got into a car with Stefan heading towards the capital. The road seemed longer than before. Every police checkpoint was a threat, every overtaking a chance to be seen. But they arrived. Nevena was waiting for them in a discreet coffee shop downtown. She was a woman in her 40s with quick eyes and a firm voice. She immediately took them to a safe house. Not a hotel, not an office, but a small apartment she used only for sensitive meetings. On the way, she explained the plan, a full recording of Veselina's story, with cross-referenced evidence, documents, records, then contact with international NGOs. If the story got out in the right channels, with the right timing, it could create pressure. It might not change the system, but it might save someone. The recording lasted 3 hours. Veselina told everything: the name of the village, the sale, the journey, the house in Bucharest, the name of the man who called her Nadja, the woman who chose the girls, the white room, the profile, the escape, Emil, the hiding place, the black cars, the interrogation disguised as a visitor, and finally, the final escape until she found Stefan. Nevena listened to everything without interrupting. She just took notes. At the end, she squeezed her hand tightly. "You are dangerous now. More than ever. You are not just another victim. You are a witness. And witnesses are annoying." The journalist sent the material to partners in France, Germany, and the United Kingdom. The next day, Veselina's story was already circulating on whistleblower websites, on anonymous profiles on X, formerly Twitter, in posts on Reddit. She was given names like the missing bride of Sliven or the girl with the stolen name. Real images of previous disappearances began to emerge. Other names, other faces, other girls. And that's when the real terror began. Nevina's apartment was broken into. Luckily, everyone was out, but the cameras were destroyed, the main computer stolen, the external hard drives broken. The message was clear: stop. That same morning, Stefan's phone rang. An unfamiliar male voice simply said, "There is no justice for those who survive, only silence." After that, they turned off all the lights. They locked everything. Nevina decided to take Veselina to a shelter run by an international organization on the outskirts of Sofia. There she could stay for an indefinite period, with a new identity, away from the city. But the girl refused. "I don't want to disappear again," he said. "I disappeared once, and no one ever heard from me again. I don't want that to happen again." "But they're coming after you," Nevina retorted. "You know what those men are capable of doing." "I know. But I also know what happens when no one speaks, when everyone is silent. I am just one. But there are others. I need them to see that it is possible, even if it is just for a moment." The silence that followed was one of respect. Stefan looked at her like a father. Rada, on the other end of the line, cried. Nevena took a deep breath. "Then let's do this as loudly as possible." 2 days later, Veselina appeared on international television. Her face was partially covered, her voice altered, but her words were real, shouted, vivid. And it was on that day that she received a new anonymous message. It just said, "You shouldn't have shown your face. Next will be Katya." Veselina read Katya's name in that message. Her world stopped. Her body went still, but inside everything screamed. The last time she had seen the girl was that cold morning, before they were separated. Katya was shaking so much that she could barely speak. Now, she was a living threat. A reminder of what the system wanted to erase, and they were using that against Veselina. "They have her," he murmured, gripping his cell phone so tightly that his fingers turned pale. Nevena asked, watching the screen closely. "Absolutely. Only someone on the inside would know her name, and would know that she means something to me." Stefan, in the background, clenched his fists, pacing the small room that had been used as a support center. Nevena took a deep breath, picked up the phone and called one of her sources, someone in Bucharest, someone who owed her a favor. She spoke softly, firmly. When she hung up, she fixed Veselina with hard eyes. "We have a chance. Someone saw a girl with Katya's profile being taken to a house in the Pipera neighborhood where an old private members club used to operate. It's on the outskirts of the city. The place is officially closed. But in practice, it's used as an exclusive club for international clients, a luxury market. Let's go there," Veselina said without hesitation. "It's not that simple," Nevena countered. "You're an exposed face now. They'll recognize you. We can't get in, not without risking everything." Veselina replied, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Put me back on the market, just for one night." Stefan approached, indignant. "Are you crazy? After everything you've been through, you want to go back there? It's the only way. They want me. I'm valuable to them. If I go back, they'll take me straight away. And if they take me, maybe they'll take her." Nevena stared at her for long seconds. Then she sighed. "We're going to need a plan, much more than just courage." Over the next 48 hours, they set up a covert operation. Nevena reached out to contacts in the international press, human rights activists, and hackers who tracked the dark websites where the girls' names were circulated as products. And then they created a decoy. Using a fake international buyer profile, they started a rumor that Veselina, now known only as Nadja, had been rehabilitated and was available for a private event. The price was high. The location was yet to be confirmed. In less than 6 hours, they received 3 direct offers. One of them came from an address linked to the same trafficking ring in Bucharest. The invitation was clear. Bring Nadia to Pipera, midnight, discreetly. She accepted. The next day, Veselina was dressed with the same coldness as before. Neutral makeup, short dress, uncomfortable heels. But inside, she was no longer the same. Now she carried within her the story of all those who were left behind. Milena's pain, Katya's lost gaze, the silent voices that she promised, even without words, that she would not let be forgotten. The car that took her to the club was accompanied by 3 vehicles carrying undercover journalists. Drones were deployed. The operation was illegal, dangerous, desperate. But it was all they had. As she entered the place, time seemed to go backwards. The low lights, the smell of cheap perfume, the muffled laughter, the men with predatory eyes. Everything was the same. But she wasn't. Now her every step was watched, recorded, monitored. One of the organizers recognized her. He smiled cynically. Nadia, you're back. We knew it was just a matter of time. She just looked down like before. She pretended, but she was watching everything. And then she saw her. Katya. She was sitting in a corner with short hair and eyes that were too deep for her age. When he saw her, his eyes widened. But he didn't react. It was as if he no longer knew how to move. Veselina approached carefully. She touched the girl's arm and whispered, "It's me. I came for you." But before he could continue, a scream cut through the hall. "It's a trap." The lights went out. Screams, running, gunshots. Someone had found out. Someone was on the other side of the cameras. The data had been leaked. In the chaos, Veselina grabbed Katya's hand and ran. Up the stairs, down the hallways, down to the basement. The screams came from all sides. Armed men were looking for targets. But they ran as if they no longer had a body, only momentum. Deep in the basement, a narrow window. Katya hesitated, but Veselina pushed her hard. "Go!" The 2 women squeezed, tore their clothes, and cut their skin. But they got out. They fell into a dark alley behind the club. One of the drones spotted them. One of the journalists ran toward them. They were safe, but when they looked back, they saw the place burst into flames. It was no accident. Someone had decided it was better to burn everything than to leave evidence. Smoke rose black against the night sky, and the smell of burning plastic mixed with the dried blood on Veselina's hands. She held Katya tightly as both their bodies shook, not just from the cold or the pain, but from something deeper, the trauma of having survived. Police arrived minutes later but didn't ask any questions. Journalists who had been hiding until that moment began to emerge. Nevena, tears in her eyes, ran over and hugged them both. "You did it. You did it." That night, images of the 2 women running through the alleys were broadcast by international news agencies. The explosion at the club in Pipera made headlines. Drone footage showed armed men, girls locked in rooms, and fake documents scattered on the floor amid the rubble. It was what the world needed to see. And for the first time, the world did. Bulgaria was pressured. Romania was questioned. The European Union was held accountable. The system did not collapse, but it shook. Veselina and Katya were taken to a safe haven outside the Balkans. New identities, new names, promises that they would now be safe. But neither of them wanted to forget. Neither of them wanted a name other than their own. Neither of them wanted to erase the pain as if it had never happened. "They're still there," Katya said weeks later. "Other places, other girls. They just changed cities." Veselina knew, and that's why she refused to remain silent. In an exclusive interview, this time with her face visible, she said, "My name is Veselina Georgieva. I was sold at 16 by my own father. I was trafficked, tortured, erased. But I survived. And as long as I live, no one will say they didn't know." The video went viral. In less than 12 hours, it had already been translated into more than 15 languages. Embassies spoke out. Human rights organizations demanded investigations. Some well-known drug trafficking figures disappeared. Others were arrested. Most simply moved to another city. But Veselina didn't stop. 2 years later, she founded an NGO called Katya. The mission was clear: to rescue at-risk girls from isolated villages, provide them with shelter, psychological support, and most importantly, visibility. The NGO grew quickly, funded by donations from ordinary citizens, outraged celebrities, and mothers who had lost daughters and didn't know where to turn. Sliven was never the same again. The market where Veselina was chosen was closed, but other markets still existed, and she knew it. Because every month she received letters, messages, hidden notes, names. One night, while living in a sheltered village on the outskirts of Sofia, Veselina received a box with no return address. Inside was just a photograph. 3 girls, in a white room, with a neutral background, not smiling. On the back of the photo, a handwritten sentence: "These are still alive." She looked at Katya, who was already walking towards the door, without needing to say anything. The pain was still there, the fear too. But now there was something stronger: courage. And for the first time, the world heard about her, and would continue to hear about her. Because she didn't disappear. She screamed for all who could scream no more. Share this video. The more people know, the fewer girls will be forgotten. Veselina's voice.